Booyah!
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Fringe. Anytime we've discussed Justin Trudeau and his draconian censorship laws here on the channel, we've talked to great extent about how Justin Trudeau actively takes out government non-paid shilled prostitutes out of search engine results and essentially says that anytime people talk about him or his party in negative ways, it constitutes hate speech and is now on its way to being labeled as possible prison time for upsetting the masses, or at least those who run our current dictatorship in this country. They call it a democracy, but we all know the truth as to what it is. The question always comes around as to how do we combat these problems? How do we get around censorship? We've heard about how in the US election, companies like Meta took large payouts to suppress certain news stories so that certain specific presidential candidates couldn't get their ridings up or get their votes out. And of course, we all know how that turned out. But now, when you see platforms like YouTube jumping on board with the censorship bandwagon, or essentially being ordered by the government of Canada to follow those censorship practices, the question begs as to how does one combat free speech on this platform while still getting their content out? And what does this mean as we head into more elections? Now, I have spent much time listening to you and as my audience. We've talked in live streams, which, by the way, if you haven't joined me for my live streams yet, now would be a good time to subscribe to the channel. Join us tonight at 8 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Pacific, where we're going to go over things like this. We're also going to talk about some other things coming up in the world of politics and hear a little bit of back and forth from what you guys have to say. But I've often heard from my audience, well, you should move to Rumble, you should move to Facebook, you should move to other platforms in order to branch out, so to speak. I've always been leery of those because, unlike platforms like Rumble, the majority of those platforms contain mass censorship and rules as to things you are and are not allowed to say. So I reached out and decided I would bring in a guest today to talk about how we combat these platforms, how we get ourselves out there, and how censorship is essentially going to affect the next election coming up, both in the United States and Canada. Now, I didn't want to just bring anybody in, but rather somebody who has built quite the following on YouTube by a little name of The Quartering. Now, Jeremy Hambley of The Quartering is joining me today here on the channel, and we're going to talk all about these subjects and what exactly is best for content creators moving forward, but also what's better for you as the viewer. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with no further more ado, let me bring in today's guest. You've known him as The Quartering, Jeremy Hambley. God, I hate saying it the wrong way. Jeremy, welcome to the show. Thank you for popping in. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry I'm late. I appreciate you having me on, and yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Great, no problem. So I wanted to bring you on because I know you covered the Freedom Convoy when that was going on in Canada.
Mhm.
You've often covered Justin Trudeau's uh, bills to essentially stop free speech over the internet as well as free speech in general. And recently having videos this week covering Joe Biden's attempts to silence free speech in America. When you think about censorship on the platform, again, your channel is one that I've always followed because you're very careful about how you make your videos, how you say certain words, leave certain phrases out of videos. I'm just curious your current view of the state of the platform since you use multiple platforms to get your media out there and where you think the future of YouTube's headed with these threats, I guess, to free speech on the internet.
Well, I think the future of YouTube, it remains bright. Obviously, it's still 85% of the market, maybe more. But I do think that ultimately alt tech, new tech. I used to call it alt tech, but I like to call it new tech now. Does stand a chance to take a bite out of their pie a little bit. In particular, ideally, this is an election year in the United States, so various platforms that are not YouTube. Obviously, I have my loyalties, but for the purpose of this question, I remain unloyal and simply loyal to new tech altogether. Anything that's a free speech platform, I'm a fan of. And, I think that in 2024, you're going to see more people embracing new tech, which is great. Anything that weakens a monopoly is great. And YouTube remains still an important tool to find people, reach people, convince people, convert people. So I think obviously YouTube is going to be around, but they've never been more vulnerable, and I've never been more happy about it.
Great. So I've seen there's some success on Rumble, and again, I know you mentioned Rumble. A lot of times I've seen creators like Viva Fry, of course, who does his main YouTube streams and then moves over to Rumble. And I understand, certain creators have partnerships with the platform and whatnot, but a lot of things that people kind of get mixed up in the conversation when it comes to new platforms, whether it's BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble, etc., is that the platforms just don't measure up to what YouTube has. Now, in terms of its algorithm, in terms of its suggested videos or how it moves you along from one creator to another, I understand those gripes with Rumble. But I know it's somebody who's been championing Rumble lately. Like you've said that there's been a lot of improvements. And while viewers are always telling me, "Hey, man, you should move to Rumble. It's free speech." Some people always say they don't want to mirror their content on the platform because they're worried about losing viewers. But I keep hearing that Rumble is on its way up in terms of a producer. Do you think that with Elon's announcement of X, and I know you've had concerns about that, that Rumble or another platform, and I know, again, you're tied in with Rumble and things like that, so I
Mhm.
don't want to say anything that might defame Rumble or make them
No, no,
sound
it's fine.
awful, but
Yeah.
but do you think we're going to see a viable competitor to YouTube in the near future?
Well, of course. I mean, I guess it just depends what content you want to watch. Could Rumble or X compete on cat videos? No. Are they going to compete on Mr. Beast videos? No. Will they compete on news? Absolutely. Will they compete on alt health, or homeopathy, or homesteading, or a wide variety of categories? Absolutely. I think that the idea of having a YouTube destroyer or replacement is unrealistic. But I do think that for depending on the type of content, look, I still enjoy Angry Video Game Nerd, for example, all time favorite
Mhm.
YouTube channel, or all time favorite content. I watch his Christmas series every Christmas. He's never going to create a Rumble channel. He has no reason to. There's
Right.
a lot of content creators that have no reason to create new tech, and so uh, I think X is okay. It's not great for video content. It's pretty terrible, but it's great for a lot of other stuff. And I
Mhm.
think Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey are all great for unfiltered, kind of more uncut type video content. Wherever the monetization goes, that's going to be kind of where people go. There will be never really be a reason for somebody to only be on new tech. Um, but as long as people embrace the idea that supporting new tech um, is better than just putting all your eggs in one basket, I think that's a huge win.
Right.
I mean, YouTube's always going to have the lion's share, but in a perfect world, it's only 70%,
Right.
75% of the market. Because 25% of the market for new tech is still hundreds of millions of people.
Right. So that brings me to the politics of things. And that's where, again, in Canada, I know things are a little different than how they're working in the United States. Whereas Justin Trudeau has essentially blocked free speech on the internet in terms of media outlets that aren't subsidized by the government, essentially not being put into search algorithms that people can't exactly actively search out their content unless they're aware that they
Yeah,
exist. We've seen YouTube now. Of course, they say there's no such thing as shadow bans. We all know that. Well, I have my assumptions. I'll just say that much. But
of course there is.
um, yeah. So when it comes to content creators starting out, I know for myself, it's been about a 2 year grind trying to get to where I am, saying that I want to get the news out. I want to get things out to people that are happening in our world so that we can make change. But when it comes to censorship, and especially, I mean, you guys have an election year coming up. We've got our elections coming up in
Yeah.
2025. So a lot of change is going to go across in North America, and essentially, it looks like it's going in a positive way in terms of fighting censorship or
Mhm.
bad plans when it comes to governments, I guess, or bad ideologies. But I guess with those kind of censorship, how would you encourage a local content creator to essentially make an impact today when they're so limited by their reach?
My advice in 2024 is no different than it was in 2020, and that is that you should be everywhere.
Mhm.
Before I ever had to deal with Rumble, which by the way isn't exactly like, I'm still grinding on every other platform. Before I ever had to deal with Rumble, I was publishing content there. I was publishing
Mm.
content to BitChute, to Odyssey. Yeah, I mean, VidMe when that was around. Any new tech platform that exists. By the way, also Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. You should be on everything. There is literally no reason to not put your content out on every platform that you can for as long as you can before being banned. The key factor is to understand how to centralize your viewers. Now there are apps out there, shout out to apps like GrayJ, which is an app that lets you subscribe. I don't have any money involved in it. I have nothing to do with it, but it's an app that lets you subscribe to the creator. So say I want um, you know, unacceptable fringes content, and I don't care if it gives me a Rumble video or an Odyssey video or whatever. These type of apps are great. As a creator, understanding that just make your content available everywhere, create your own website, very simple type website that aggregates your content so that your viewers can find you. It's literally no different than 2020 or 2016. Yeah, YouTube is where most people are. But if you can pick up a few hundred people on Odyssey, a few hundred people on BitChute, a few hundred people on Rumble, a few hundred people on YouTube, a few hundred people on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, before you know it, you've got a few thousand people, and you might be able to support yourself. You might be able to make a living. You might be able to.
Mm.
So it's about casting as wide a net as humanly possible. Always has been, and it's never been more true than right now.
Right. I guess what I'm alluding to essentially is when it comes to the censorship. Now, we all know about YouTube's infamous adpocalypse, and now that they're very careful about
Mhm.
certain content and words, and again, things that are said in videos, and we've heard about potential money coming to companies like Meta throughout the last election in the US. So in order to suppress news stories. So I guess what I'm asking is how do you feel we fight that? How do we win essentially? Because YouTube doesn't seem to want to get the message. Do you think they're ever going to come around, or do you think that again it's going to have to result in platforms having downfalls in order for people to get ahead, or is this just going to kind of be the norm moving forward?
Well, I think you fight that by supporting every conceivable alternative and by offering exclusive content there and promoting it. That's the only way you defeat it. I mean,
Mhm.
YouTube has a virtual monopoly via its own Android app store, and like basically every conceivable thing pushes people to YouTube. Google, the world's number one search engine, promotes what? YouTube videos. They don't link Rumble videos. They don't link Odyssey videos, BitChute videos, X videos. Wait, not those type of videos, but
Yeah.
there are all sorts of ways that the only way you defeat it is by continuing to support new tech. Either that or you sit at home and you wait for the government to fix it for you, which they've literally never done in history. So, the best case scenario, the best thing to do is to be everywhere at all times and to go out of your way and work harder than everyone else to support new tech platforms and new alternatives and new free speech platforms. I mean, there's a reason that I have a chat, I have for Twitter, I have a Twitter, Gab, Truth Social, Minds. It's a lot of work, a ton of work. But I mean, do I care about free speech or not? I mean, that's the question. So the only way you really chip away at it is by supporting new and alternative technology. And I'm glad that there are more options out there. Like people think, oh, X competes with Rumble. It doesn't. I'm glad that there's more. X doesn't compete with Rumble. It doesn't compete with BitChute. They all compete with YouTube and the censorship industrial complex that is
Mhm.
Silicon Valley. So use new tech, take the extra 5 minutes to do it, and that's the more people that do that, the weaker the monopoly gets.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, Jeremy, again, I don't want to keep dancing around the circle, but I do appreciate you coming in to chime in
Yeah.
to give your 2 cents on the subject because, again, you've built a very mass, I guess, media I don't want to say empire, but outlet essentially on these multiple platforms. So if anybody's going to take the advice, this is where to get it from, straight from the horse's mouth. So thank you so much for coming onto the channel to discuss this today, and hopefully things go well in your U.S. election. Again, I know you don't typically get into politics since
Mhm.
the Midwestly, but and we don't need to chime in on those things. But I think good things are hopefully coming, especially in both countries again. And hey, thanks for popping by, man. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. And I definitely support what you're doing. And I have a lot of Canadian viewers, so I'm keenly aware of what's going on in there, including this insane hate speech law, like anything you've ever published in the, so Canada is just a heartbeat away from America in terms of what's going on politically. It's like the UK, Canada, the United States. So I'm always keenly aware of what's going on in Canada. And Justin Trudeau sucks. Thanks for having me on. And I wish you all the best. And if you ever need anything, just let me know, and I'm around.
Absolutely. Jeremy Hambley, thank you so much for popping on, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to head over to the Quartering on all of his multitude of platforms and give him some love over there. Join his podcasts. You're doing your new podcast daily on Rumble. I
Yep.
see you're on Twitter as well as that's the Quartercast, I believe.
Yeah, 5:30 Eastern. Just look up the quartering on Rumble. That's Rumble's the platform that matters the most to me, and
Yep.
it's the best shot we've had in 20 years at taking a bite out of YouTube. So
Right.
definitely check it out. Hope you enjoyed the show, and give it a try.
Sounds good. Jeremy Hambley, thanks again for popping by. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Derek. Have a good one.
You too.